Most people's thinking is highly rigid and closed. You may think you're open-minded, but odds are that you aren't as open-minded as you think you are. And you can always be more open-minded. Before I talk about how you can become more open-minded, first I have to tackle what is rigid and closed thinking and what is open-minded thinking. First, rigid and closed thinking. Most people think this way, at least to some extent. So if you're rigid and closed, you're stuck in a way of thinking and behaving. Some characteristics of rigid and closed thinking: if you're very rigid and closed-minded, you'll have a hard time admitting yourself being wrong. You're very defensive of your beliefs, of you being correct. If you're closed and rigid, you tend to be filled with dogma and beliefs. Imagine the stereotypical image of an Orthodox Christian or a flat earther or some hard-nosed scientist. Their fundamental beliefs can't be proven wrong. Even if you show an alternative perspective, they won't even consider it. And that brings us to another characteristic of closed and rigid thinking, which is lack of self-reflection, as well as lack of critical thinking. You don't question your beliefs at all. You're dead set that you are in the right. Often, if you're more rigid and closed, you also think in terms of black and white. Things are either one way or another way. There's no room for anything in between. Either something's true or something's not true. There's no nuance there. Now, if you're very rigid and closed-minded, you also don't like change. Change is seen as a threat, which makes you more traditional and politically conservative. And the cost is a slow pace of change and development. You can't really adapt to new situations as well. Another characteristic is that you have a very narrow view of the world. Imagine you're looking at the world only through one lens. It can be religious, political, scientific, etc. But you only use one lens, and you're unable to see things in a different light. Another characteristic of rigid and closed thinking is that it tends to be very consistent. Your thinking and acting is consistent, which can be good in certain situations and bad in others. For example, if you're trying to cut bad habits or some addictions or something like that, being rigid and closed means you're not open to new solutions, so it's harder to let go of things. It's harder to change your habits. Now, how do you get rigid or closed thinking? If you've been brought up with only one perspective around you, your family's perspective or your town's perspective, your local culture, the specific field of education you go in, if you only expose yourself to one perspective, then you'll be more rigid and closed-minded. If you only have one perspective, that's the lens that you'll see the world in, and everything else is again perceived as a threat. Because if your perspective or behavior or belief system, etc., if that one lens works, why change it? If you change it, it might not work. If you change it, it might not continue functioning the same way, and that's dangerous. So that's why you develop this rigid and closed mindset. But the problem is, if you only have one lens, one tool, certain situations might require a different lens or a different tool to solve. A hammer is very good at fixing nails, but it's completely useless in sewing clothes. That's why you need multiple tools, multiple perspectives in life. And that's why you don't want to be thinking rigidly and closed-minded. Now, some other limitations of rigid and closed-minded thinking: you're locked into a certain belief system. You can't change your thinking or your behavior. That also means you have a tougher time learning about the world, as well as again cutting bad habits and addictions. And you're unable to adapt to new situations. For example, if we have some city with a particular type of belief system or culture there, if a bunch of people move in with a different culture, the original people who lived in the city are gonna have a tougher time dealing with that if they're closed-minded and rigid. That's why we have things like racism, xenophobia, because you're afraid of the other perspectives, other cultures, etc. But the biggest problem if you're closed-minded and rigid is that you miss out on a large facet of life. You only have that one lens, and maybe that one lens can only see the color red. Then imagine how many different colors you miss out on. Different perspectives, different belief systems, and different cultures. And that's why you have to build your open-mindedness. Now, what is open-minded thinking? Being open-minded means you're open to new perspectives, new belief systems, new cultures, new experiences, new ways of being. And now again, some characteristics of open-mindedness. If you're open-minded, you're willing to explore different perspectives, different experiences, ones that you're not used to. And this makes you better at learning because you're able to learn from multiple perspectives instead of just one. So you build a more big picture perspective of the world. You incorporate multiple perspectives, and thus you're more multi-perspectival. There's not just one truth. Everything's not black and white anymore. There's more grays and nuances. Things are more relative instead of absolute. If you're open-minded, then other perspectives and cultures aren't demonized anymore. If you're closed-minded, you tend to demonize everything that's different. Different belief systems, different cultures, different races. You demonize it because you interpret it as a threat. But if you're open-minded, you recognize that all these different perspectives have some truth to them. If you're open-minded, you also have a faster pace of growth and change. You're more easily able to let go of bad habits and addictions because you have more tools, more perspectives at your disposal, more new methods you can try, different lifestyles you can do. You're not clinging to what you're used to. So being open-minded makes you better at adapting to situations. Now, being open-minded makes you more liberal, though you have to remember a lot of people who classify themselves as liberal, they're still very much closed-minded to the alternative perspective. A lot of people have adopted wokeness as their one perspective. So you can be liberal and still closed closed-minded, unwilling to explore the alternative. Now, how does open-mindedness evolve then? If you're around multiple perspectives, multiple cultures or belief systems, then you start to recognize that one isn't necessarily better than the other. One political party isn't necessarily better than the other one, they're just different. You learn to adapt to different perspectives and different situations. You don't defend your perspective as the only correct one anymore, because you recognize there are others out there. This is a very positive thing about open-mindedness. You're able to explore different perspectives, experiences, and cultures. You suck up more knowledge from different perspectives. You learn more about the world. Now, I'd like to make a clarification. Open-mindedness does not mean blindly accepting every crazy perspective out there. You can still be skeptical and open-minded, but you don't automatically dismiss those perspectives, no matter how crazy they are. And now, how can you develop your open-mindedness? The best thing you can do is to read material you disagree with. Read about alternative perspectives, especially those that are outside the mainstream. Learn about the political parties you disagree with. Learn about some belief systems which you think are crazy. And I don't mean just read about them surface level, I mean explore them deeply. Try to understand them, where they're coming from. If you're an atheist, explore religion. If you're religious, explore science. Whatever you think is false or crazy or out there, immerse yourself in that perspective. You don't have to blindly believe that perspective, but try to understand it. Go deeper than surface level and contemplate those perspectives. Now, it doesn't have to be perspectives, it can be some different culture or experience. Then I urge you to try that crazy experience which you dismissed earlier. Another way to become more open-minded is to think more big picture, more relative. If you're dead set on something being a certain way, contemplate, are there any alternatives out there? Could it be some other way? You have to contemplate your beliefs, especially the ones that you hold as self-evident. My political party is the best, science is the way to understand reality, the Bible is written by God, or everything in the Bible is true, or I am my brain and body. Well, what if you're not? Seriously contemplate that. And again, not just surface level. And notice that you're very biased to answer a certain way. And overall, the method to become more open-minded is to expose yourself to new things. New perspectives, experiences, cultures. That's the surefire, easiest way to become more open-minded. And this is something to remember. Becoming more open-minded is often very difficult. It's scary to let go of your beliefs, especially if you've held them a very long time. If you think something is this way and you believe that for, say, 10 years, it's very scary to contemplate, well, what if it's not? It's scary to admit that you've been wrong. Becoming more open-minded takes mental energy. You can think of your open-mindedness as a sphere. Inside that sphere is what you're open to. This is what you're able to consider and explore. Now, stretching that sphere requires energy, and it can often be painful. But once you've stretched your sphere of open-mindedness, you have more things inside that you can explore, more perspectives you can learn from, more experiences you can take. And that's why becoming more open-minded is the best thing you can do to learn more about the world and to grow as a person. Simply put, becoming more open-minded unlocks new territories for you to explore. And who knows what kind of valuable things you'll discover in those alternative perspectives. Now, open-mindedness goes hand in hand with your development on the spiral dynamic scale. So if you want to learn more about that, watch this video right here. That's all.